Hello and welcome. The moment I understood the environmentally rapacious eco side of fracking, I instantly became an active opponent and did everything within my power to sound the alarm and have it banned. Part of these diverse actions was the establishment of this alternative news channel, where my initial videos calling for an immediate and total ban still remain. Not a single aspect of my many video reports has proven false, but the warnings issued decades ago now ring with added urgency. I recently viewed a deeply concerning YouTube clip filmed in West Texas. It covered the issue of zombie wells that now, as tiresomely predicted and repeatedly warned, herald the onset of a runaway environmental catastrophe. The on-site reporter noted how the ground crunched underfoot with a crust that looks like frost, but it's highly toxic mineral salts. And there was a constant background hiss coming from the disused and abandoned fracking well that was supposed to be dead, but it isn't. They're called zombie wells, fracking wells that were plugged, sealed, and pronounced safe until they're not. Today we explore a disturbing issue wreaking havoc upon the environment in countries everywhere, and what that portends for our immediate future and for the futures of generations to come. We also examine why abandoned oil and gas wells across Texas are suddenly coming back to life, and the horrific consequences resulting from failing seals and terminally degraded casings. We go from farmland scarred by salt water to a toxic lake that shouldn't exist, through the science that explains why these wells resurrect, and into the halls of agencies tasked with stopping them. A zombie well isn't a technical term, it's a warning. These are wells drilled decades ago, sometimes a century, which were later plugged and abandoned. On paper, they're done and dusted. Underground, the story is very different. Over time, pressure builds. Seals that were state-of-the-art in the 1950s crack under 2020's conditions. And when that pressure finds a weak path, the well wakes up. Fluids and gases migrate through old casing cement or surrounding rock, and they rise. The result? Cancerous and neurotoxic contaminants pollute aquifers, seep into soil, and vent into the air, all from a well that no one's supposed to worry about anymore. So what's pushing on these old seals? One big culprit: modern extraction practices, specifically the forced injection of fracking wastewater deep underground. Think millions of gallons of salty, highly toxic, chemically complex water pumped into disposal wells. That fluid raises underground pressures, and the fracking damaged geology does the rest. Researchers traced injected wastewater as far as 10 miles underground, eventually surfacing through a previously plugged fracking well 12 miles distant. If you picture the subsurface as a maze, legacy wells are the aging doors. Some still hold, some don't. And then there's the hardware itself. Many wells were plugged with methods that made perfect sense for the time, but weren't designed for today's pressures. Add decades of corrosion, and you've got an ever-extending list of vulnerable points. Let's talk about what comes out when a zombie well awakens. We're not just talking about toxic water. We're talking about arsenic and benzene, deadly carcinogens, hydrogen sulfide, the rotten egg gas that's deadly at high concentrations. Even naturally occurring radioactive materials can hitch a ride in brines. Sometimes the damage is dramatic. In West Texas, there's Lake Boehmer, a poisonous human-made lake created by an out-of-control flow of mineral-laden water. Its corrosive chemistry is so hostile that fish, birds, even algae can't survive. It shouldn't exist, but it does. And it's a warning sign sketched into the landscape. And sometimes the damage announces itself with frightening violence. First, the ground shudders. Then a stinking column of brine and gas suddenly punches skyward. A toxic geyser, 30 feet high, atomizing into a glittering mist that tastes metallic on the tongue before witnesses realise they shouldn't be breathing it. The spray drifts on the wind, stippling vehicle windshields with an oily sheen. Where it falls, the vegetation yellows, grasses collapse, and a white crust starts forming in real time like frost racing across the soil. Rivulets carve bright salty runnels towards the stock tank, turning the water into something that catches the light in rainbow swirls. Emergency responders park upwind. They pull on respirators because hydrogen sulfide doesn't negotiate, and at higher concentrations it steals your sense of smell before stifling your breath and poisoning your lungs. A handheld meter flickers, chirps, then screams. The crew chalks a perimeter in orange flags. A farmer watches in horror. Up close, the hardware tells another story. Corroded casing, cement that crumbles like old chalk. The well was declared dead decades ago. Now it's writing its own obituary across the landscape. Salts bleaching the soil to bone, aerosols lacing the air with benzene and other hydrocarbons, droplets etching metallic scars on fence posts. Even when the flow is finally choked off, the aftermath remains, a salted kill zone, a stock tank no one dares to use, and a quiet question hanging in the heat. How many more can wake up like this? And then there's the subtle kind of harm, slow leaks that salt out pastures, killing all vegetation. Farmers find the soil turning into brittle, white crust, wells and tanks turning undrinkable. That's not just an environmentally cautionary tale. It's a livelihood story. In cities, the risk goes quiet and invisible. Abandoned wells have been found beneath homes, churches, and schools, venting pockets of gas. If you live nearby, you can't see the benzene, you can't see the hydrogen sulfide, but the body registers headaches, irritated lungs, and long-term risks researchers have tied to elevated rates of autoimmune disorders, respiratory disease, and myriad cancers. In Texas, the Railroad Commission, the oil and gas regulator, oversees these wells. Inspectors log leaks, issue notices, and coordinate plugging, but it's not enough. They highlight inadequate inspections, delayed responses, and plugging techniques routinely failing under modern pressures. The ongoing cost is enormous. Plugging is engineering intensive and expensive. Multiply that by thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands, of abandoned and orphaned wells throughout the world, and the bill is incalculable. When the original operator disappears or can't pay, taxpayers foot the bill. There is money flowing into orphan well plugging programs, and some wells are being addressed, but the pace lags behind the problem, and the backlog keeps growing exponentially. Meanwhile, the wells keep leaking. If this is a man-made problem, what would a man-made solution look like? Well, clearly, the first response is to immediately ban fracking in perpetuity. But the satanic fiends driving this deliberate destruction are criminally insane. What else can we expect from an establishment that criminally perverts justice to protect high echelon pedophiles instead of prosecuting them as mandated by law? However, action groups can insist upon stronger financial bonds. Make sure ecocidal companies post enough upfront to cover the true end-of-life costs of wells, so the public isn't the clean-up crew of last resort. Modern plugging standards use today's best materials and multi-barrier techniques designed for injection-era pressures, not mid-century assumptions. Aggressive monitoring. Map every legacy well, prioritise high-risk sites near aquifers and communities, and use continuous monitoring to catch leaks early. Pressure management. Urgently reassess wastewater injection volumes and locations with regional pressure models so disposable doesn't turn dead legacy wells into pressure relief valves. Rapid response. When a leak happens, speed matters. Faster investigations and emergency plugging prevent small leaks from becoming toxic landmarks. A rancher in West Texas advised she used to run cattle across a pasture that's now a patchwork of salt flats and dead brush. The water in our stock tank went bad. Tests showed high salinity and dangerous contaminants consistent with oil field brines. An engineer described opening an old well and finding the cement collar sloughed away like chalk. It held for decades, he said, until the pressure found it. A nurse practitioner from a nearby clinic said she keeps a pulse oximeter in her bag. When the wind shifts and that rotten egg smell hits, she said, we see an alarming spike in respiratory complaints. These are the kinds of details that don't fit into a spreadsheet, but they live in people's lungs, their land, their balance sheets. If you're near any fracking production site, here's some practical steps. Learn what's beneath you. Check state well maps to see if you live or work near a legacy well site. Report suspicious signs, persistent rotten egg odours, sudden salt crusts on soil or bubbling in standing water near old pads. It should all be reported immediately to regulators. Lobby for full transparency. Push for public, searchable databases of well integrity tests, plugging records, and responses to leaks. Back funding that matches the scale. Plugging isn't cheap, but delay is expensive. Advocate for programs that make the polluter pay and protect the public health. Zombie wells are a legacy of a century of extraction colliding with today's pressures, literally. The technology that unlocked modern oil and gas also unlocked old seams and fractures. If we don't move with great purpose and a whole lot faster, the costs will keep escalating in our groundwater, in our air, and in the lives of unsuspecting victims who never signed up to live next to a waking well. This factual zombie apocalypse is far more horrific and consequential than anything scripted in a Hollywood movie studio. We've consistently predicted this inevitable calamity for decades, and now it's here. If fracking had been banned pursuant to overwhelming community demand and the incontestable proof of harm, it wouldn't be. If you found this episode useful, please share it and give it a thumbs up. It helps others find the information and it helps keep these stories in the light. Thank you for watching.